Yesterday, we just made an announcement about the details of our Codeathon. But they're not hacking, they're coding. And so, good opportunity today to talk in a little bit more detail about how we envisage that working and what we're hoping to achieve from that project. It's, basic details, 22nd to 24th of March. It's part of the XRP Gold Coast 2024 convention. It's in person or remote. You can participate either way, so you don't have to be in the Gold Coast, Australia, in order to participate. We've set aside 300,000 ZAR and 30,000 EVERs as prize pool. We're looking for projects that showcase the combined power of the XRP ledger, Zahao, and Evernode, and we've got 3 project themes that we've chosen to focus on. There's Web3 games, interconnections, and what we call Middleman be gone. So let me talk a little bit more about that in detail. For the essential details, Royal Pines Resort looks a really lovely spot. There's no entry fee to participate in the Codeathon, separate from any fee you might be paying to attend the conference. So it's not one of those ones where often there's an entry fee with some of these things. That's not the case here. And we will have arrangements set up so that people can participate in workshops and brainstorm ideas, resolve technical challenges with the team of experts from Evernode. So we're hoping that, this makes it accessible for people, everywhere around the world, not just people who happen to be able to be in the Gold Coast on the 22nd to the 24th of March. First theme, we're aiming for Web3 games. And what we want here is, we think that there's a really good gaming model available from combining Evernode, Zahao, and the XRP ledger. And when we talk about the vision, Evernode dApps they've got more flexibility than traditional smart contracts, right? Because Evernode, the way Evernode works, it's simply a normal app pulled together with a consensus mechanism to form a dApp. It can be programmed in any language that you might program a traditional application, and it can perform in a way that's similar to traditional applications. So performing computations, connecting to external services. And so you can have an app or a dApp on Evernode that performs like a bespoke Oracle, because it can actually, the way that you can make it work, you might have your application running on 10 nodes. The application might need to know something about the outside world. You can program it so that 3 nodes are elected to and delegated to go out to the external world, find out the answer to your question, enter a consensus round amongst the 3 nodes so that they agree on what the answer is, and then report that back as the canonical answer to the remaining nodes for the purposes of your dApp. And we think that we can leverage this flexibility to deliver new Web3 gaming experiences. And this is one of Richard's ideas. It's called Client Cluster Chain, and it's a different type of design philosophy. It works like this. So the client, we have this issue, the game plays on the client's devices, so that's client side. Right, so it's not an on-chain game. What happens in the game happens on your device. You're playing it on your phone or your computer. The cluster refers to the fact that the Evernode dApp or the Evernode cluster is invited into the game to act as a referee. So it's basically a witness of the game. And it's a decentralized witness, so it's a cluster. You can make the code for that cluster open source. Everyone knows the identity of the cluster. It's got its own address on the ledger on Zahao, so you can identify it. And it's the referee to police behavior and confirm the veracity of results or game states. So very often in games now there are external servers that are trying to perform this role. The problem is they're centralized and, can they be trusted? Can they not be trusted? Are they up? Are they not up? All this sort of stuff. So the contract performs as the referee, and then does the minting onto the chain. So the Evernode cluster, the chain component, then publishes the results and the game minted NFTs to a layer one chain, being the XRP ledger or Zahao. And these on-chain objects are used to bind the community, reward wins, and drive meta tournaments. We think we can do something that's different and better and superior to this, NFTs in games. Your Vorpal Sword +4 is an NFT minted on this chain, and you can use it in other games maybe if things allow. It's different to that approach. It's in game design, there's these concepts called primary, secondary, and tertiary gameplay loops. So the games are made. The primary gameplay loop is what happens moment to moment. So if you're playing a Souls-like game, what are you doing? You're dodging and rolling and hacking and slashing and heavy attacking an enemy to try and win, right? And then the secondary gameplay loop is, well, why are you fighting all these monsters? Because you want to level up, because you want to get particular items. And then the tertiary gameplay loop is, well, why are you doing all of that? Well, because there's a community and you want to be top of the community. You want your output to be, you want to be the best player in the Souls-like community, etc. And so this client cluster chain approach kind of, can mirror that primary, secondary, tertiary gameplay loop. The primary gameplay loop is what happens on the client's devices. The secondary gameplay loop can happen at the cluster level, and the tertiary gameplay loop, which represents, your competition within a community of people, that can happen on chain and is represented in NFTs, which are community awards or some other level of tournament that happens at the chain level using the NFTs that you've only been able to create because an Evernode cluster witnessed your game and is trusted by everybody as the primary witness of what happened in your game. So our vision, this ties into one of the missions that we've set ourselves at Evernode Labs is to develop a studio of these kind of Web3 games. We're picturing, a site. It's got all these types of games. They're simple, fun, engaging to play games, and then we're using the cluster and the chain to add a secondary and tertiary level of gameplay to what are otherwise just very simple mobile games. And we're aiming, you can imagine a website where there's just, a Steam-like website where there's just all these games that you can go and download and start playing, invite the Evernode cluster into your game as a referee and as a witness, and then out of that be participating in some kind of minting on chain because of your game behavior. We're excited to see what people might build out of that potential game design philosophy. For this particular theme, we've got up to 10 awards of 10,000 Zahao and 1,000 Evers for suitable projects. And if there's less than 10 projects, we might apportion those rewards differently. And if there's no suitable projects, well, we might not make any awards. So we're hoping to get inundated with simple games that adopt this client cluster chain philosophy. The second theme is interconnections, and what this is about is trying to showcase Evernode's ability to connect the XRPL's liquidity and security with Zahao's flexibility and composability. What we mean by that is Evernode clusters have this capacity to hold keys to accounts on both the XRP ledger and Zahao. And so you can have that cluster act as a decentralized way to automate transactions on each chain. And this arises because Evernode contracts are able to talk to external services. They're able to connect to other machines and to poke them and to do things. And so the Evernode cluster can hold keys to accounts, and then it can use those keys to sign into the account and make that account, initiate transactions using that account. So it's kind of like connective tissue between these two chains. One of the features of XRPL and Zahao is because they're built from the same code base, we get this imported accounts function, and we use this for our airdrop. So how do we know that you on the XRP ledger controlled an address on the XRP ledger that held some XRP, and so we should deposit some Evers into this address on the Zahao ledger? Well, it was done with importing accounts. So you can import your R address on the XRP ledger into Zahao, you get the same R address and you get the same keys. And that way we know that even though this is a different, you're on a different ledger Zahao, we know the same person must control those two accounts. If we add Evernode's ability to hold the keys to an R address, then what we get is the capacity that the Evernode cluster can hold some keys, and those keys allow it to sign a transaction on Zahao, or it allows them to sign a transaction on the XRP ledger. And we can therefore add some programmability to both chains, because I can have the Evernode cluster use its keys to sign transactions depending on predetermined rules according to how the cluster has been programmed. So you could have a situation where a hook on Zahao could trigger a response from an Evernode cluster that causes it to initiate a transaction on the XRP ledger, right? So a hook fires on Zahao. Because it did that, the Evernode cluster uses its keys to go in and sign a transaction on the XRP ledger. And hey presto, I've got a kind of smart contract-ish functionality for the XRP ledger, even though it doesn't have it. Equally, a transaction on the XRP ledger could cause an Evernode cluster to initiate a transaction on Zahao. That transaction could poke a hook on Zahao, resulting in further Zahao transactions. So there are ways that I could potentially access the hook functionality on Zahao, even though I'm on the XRP ledger. I do this, that causes the cluster to do something. And so that fires a hook, right? So we're excited to see what developers might create from such interconnections. At its fundamental level, we're talking about this capacity for an Evernode cluster to hold the keys to matching R addresses on Zahao and on the XRP ledger, and be able to, act as connective tissue between the two in a decentralized way. So it's not my keys. The keys belong to the cluster, and the cluster can be programmed to do stuff. The prize pool for that, for the winner, 50,000 Zahao and 5,000 Evers, and 2 second runner-up prizes of half that amount. Again, if we don't get suitable submissions, there might not be anything awarded. What we're talking about here could potentially be fairly substantial applications. So we'll see if we get, what we're chasing for out of that. The third theme is Middleman be gone. So what we're looking for here is projects that showcase Evernode's ability to replace online middlemen with a self-organizing community powered by decentralized software. This is near and dear to my heart. Everywhere today we see powerful middlemen and gatekeepers, especially in the online world, right? So things that started off as useful applications have now become indispensable. And because they're indispensable, they're increasingly used by regulators and governments as gatekeepers and police, right? So you can't access this app unless you do A, B, and C. We will, make this company ban you, et cetera, et cetera. You've got to behave in a certain way in order to access certain applications. We think Evernode allows developers to build apps that free people from this over-reliance, because Evernode apps or Evernode dApps are just apps with a consensus mechanism attached. In theory, there's an awful lot of online applications that are centralized that could be replaced by a decentralized version. That is a smart contract that does all the bits and pieces, or the crucial bits and pieces that the online application does, and it's a community that does the rest. We call this middleman be gone, and we think it's a powerful use case. What are we talking about there? Imagine an app that's booking.com, but it doesn't have booking.com in the middle taking 30%, all right? Or it's Uber, but it doesn't have Uber in the middle taking 30%, or it's Airbnb without Airbnb in the middle taking, at heart, those things are websites, and they're software programs with a bunch of, business rules behind it. But there seems to be enormous capacity to replace that centralized website with a decentralized version. And there's already an example. There's a kind of proof of concept of Voyage Lunker, which is a hotel booking site replacing booking.com. And the way that it works is that hotels join the network by spinning up their own instance, right? They spin up their own node effectively that runs the app, and that connects into the network, in the same way that you can, in order to submit transactions to, say, the Zahao network, you should have your own Zahao node that then connects into the network, and there's validators participating in consensus. It's a similar kind of model for how you might be involved in this type of application. So you get the community runs the instances. All of those instances are stitched together using consensus on the Evernode network, and from out of that you get a website that functions indistinguishably from booking.com or indistinguishably from Uber. The difference being it doesn't take 30%, it takes 0.5%, and that 0.5% funds your development team.
Big difference.
Again, the prize pool for that is 50,000 Zahara and 5,000 Evers, with 2 runner-up prizes of half that amount. And me personally, this is part of where my research went into smart contracts, and why are smart contracts useful? Well, it's exactly for this reason, right? Is to avoid over-reliance on indispensable middlemen. So what was useful became indispensable, and once it becomes indispensable, it becomes a tyrant. You need a way out of that tyranny, and I'm hoping that we get those kinds of projects in this particular slot.
Yeah.
We've got on our website a whole bunch of resources, from the main technical resources to a whole bunch of additional resources that the team have developed over the years for working with HotPocket and Evernode, so that people can build their projects. We would love it if people would let us know they're participating. There's no registration process per se. Just start building. But if you are building, it'd be really nice if you let us know. And at the end of the day, there's a process for submitting your project for a prize. You just have to do so before the cutoff day and time. We are expecting to see working proofs of concept of the DApp, and we want to see that on the live network. We will supply a small number of Zahara and Evers to fund the teams to be able to run their applications on the live net and demonstrate that their application works as part of the judging process.
The use cases that you gave as examples are really good. I too like the middleman be gone. That one I think has a real world
Well, it's what
value.
they say smart contracts are meant to be for, right? The problem is that the current crop of smart contracts, to the extent that they're decentralized, they're also cut off from the world, right? That's why you need chains like Link to act as oracles, because you've got this application, but it can't talk to the external world. And we are just so used to building software that talks to the other, it has APIs, it has other ways of connecting to other machines to be able to get stuff done. Well, Evernode contracts can do that. So in theory, there's a brand new universe of use cases that you should be able to tackle with an Evernode contract, and Middleman be gone is one of them. There's a bunch of people on Twitter who go, like, you update people, this is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And you get things like, when are you going to announce partnerships? When are you going to announce customers? And it's like, well, it's not that type of project. You've got the wrong notion about what Evernode is and what it's going to do. Evernode is a piece of software. And the Evernode network is a bunch of independent hosts that run that software. So those hosts have clients. Those clients are dApps that lease spaces on the hosts. And those dApps will have clients, and they're the people who use the dApps because there's some sort of thing the dApp is doing by being decentralized that you can't get done or shouldn't get done in a centralized way. Right. So Evernode network itself isn't about partnerships and customers and new announcements of that sort of nature. What we would hope to be seeing over time is more people developing on Evernode, and so you get people making announcements about their projects, not Evernode making announcements about, hey, we've secured this partnership. There's no incredibly well-resourced, centralized entity that's beavering away to simply sign up partnerships and issue press releases and, all those bells and whistles. We've created the network in part because we want to build on the network. And our next step after getting the network up and running is to pivot back to building the things that we want to build, and to do that, to raise the money to build the things that we want to build. And in the meantime, one of our projects is to champion the Evernode network. And our role in championing it is to be an A-class member of the community and to share the knowledge that we've got about the Evernode network and how it works and what you can do in building on Evernode, and hackathons. These Codeathons are going to be a usual thing that we will do as part of our role of championing the network. But our main role that we would hope to, that'll get us out of bed every morning, is going to be building the applications that we think Evernode can support. The very best place at the moment for information on Evernode, other than the evernode.org website, is the Evernode Discord community. That's not run by Evernode Labs. It's run by community members, and all the questions that people have had about how do I spin up a host? I'm having trouble spinning up a host. How do I spin up as a how node? I'm having trouble spinning up as a how node. I haven't claimed my airdrop yet. How do I claim my airdrop? All of that is, there's a wonderfully well-curated bank of information in that Discord now, and some very knowledgeable people who've done an amazing job in onboarding people into this community. It would have been a lot harder to do this without that Discord, and I can't thank the community members enough for launching that Discord and running it as well as they do. The community dashboards are another great example of that. They've, the team developed a dashboard for the purpose of the test net and all that sort of stuff. But what community members have come up with has blown away anything that we could possibly ever conceivably have achieved within the same time frame, given everything else that's on our plate. We've got community members who have they've developed hooks for this is worth talking about. So when you run a host on Evernode, the software will create an account on Zahao for you, and it does that because your keys shouldn't leave the machine that they're on, right? They're your secret So the host does the creating of the account and the keys. And so now what you've got though is a bunch of people who've got the accounts inside the machine effectively. It's not on their Xammon wallet, and they need to work out how to get the Evers from the account that the machine controls into an account that they control. And a really useful way of doing that is a redirect hook. So it's a hook that you set on the account, and it auto redistributes, the Ever rewards that come into your host account. It just instantly redistributes them to your account that your Xammon wallet controls, for instance. A really simple but eminently useful use case for hooks as a level of composability. Because the hosts put so much load on the network. So the Evernode host, in order to be part of the network, right, you're constantly sending traffic to and from the Zahao network in order to show that that you're a member of the network, and B, to poke the reward hook so that it issues you with rewards. You've got to join the network, you get a registration NFT that involves a payment of Evers, which is a transaction on the Zahao network. It involves minting the registration NFT, which is a Zahao transaction. It involves offering the registration NFT to you and then you claiming it, which are two separate Zahao transactions. So there's just endless, it's activity, right? So Evernode uses the Zahao network, and that means that there's a lot more load on the public infrastructure that submits transactions to the Zahao network than that public infrastructure is used to in an analogous sense on the XRP ledger. Right? You just don't have that level of constant activity. So what you need as a host, if you want to guarantee that you're going to get rewards, you should have your own method of submitting to the Zahao network. So we now have hosts spinning up their own Zahao nodes in addition. So you've got an Evernode host, or you've got several Evernode hosts, and then you've got your own Zahao node that you use for your hosts to submit their transactions to the Zahao network, so that you're not being held up by congestion on the public network, or your transactions aren't being filtered out by some sort of filtering software that the public network runs. Which is, so this problem of how do you get people to run nodes? Well, you make it in their interest to run nodes, and hey presto, they run nodes. And we fully expect that there'll be people who will run Zahao nodes on behalf of clients. They will have a whitelist of people who agree to pay them Evers so that their transactions can get submitted to their Zahao node, because not everyone wants to or can run a Zahao node as part of their setup. So it's gratifying to see this ecosystem bubble away and start to take shape. And the next big step for us is builders on the network. So we're looking, I think we've got enough. We've got, 6,400 or more hosts. The next metric that we're focused on is the number of leased instances running on the network, and see how quickly we can push that number up. It's going to take a bit of time, because the network's only existed now for almost 6 weeks. So it takes longer than 6 weeks to build something in this space. But, we sit back and see where by the end of this year, after several Codeathons and our own efforts, etc., be interesting to see how far up the charts we can push that instance number.